As a finance team, we sometimes play defense by protecting the P&L and improving the balance sheet. But sometimes we need to take risks and join the attacks and score a few goals ourselves. So it's always that balance that you have to strike.
Oh man, I love that analogy because I often joke at my company, like, listen guys, I'm the only one who's playing defense here. I'm the only one who's playing goalie. But that resonates. There are times where I think finance has to push the pace, especially if they feel like we're leaving money on the table.
Yeah.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Oh, Canada. Welcome back to the podcast. Today's show is with Navaid Mansuri, the CFO of Dialogue, a Canadian health tech company. And we dig into what he did even before that. So he negotiated broadcast rights at a cable company called Rogers. We go through how broadcast deals get structured, the bidding involved, how many years they're for, if they're upfront, performance-based, and what content is the most valuable. I'm also a really big fan of Vice. He did a JV with Vice Media there, takes us through that, because I'm a mini media mogul myself. I don't know if you knew that. And he takes us through doing those deals during the age of cord cutting, what that was like. The story of Dialogue, wow, this is a crazy one. So they went through all sorts of business transitions. They went from private to public and then back to private. And he walks us through the timeline and how he managed communications to stakeholders in each part of those processes. We've talked to a lot of CFOs so far, luckily, who have gone public. Can't believe they take my phone calls, but we've never talked to someone who went private. So this was a really cool process to dig into. And then he talks about changing the P&L over time, the different chapters and different priorities that you have at each stage of a company's growth, especially how that changes whether you're public or private. All this and much, much more after a short word from our sponsors. As a CFO, I can say firsthand that the most important thing to know is how money enters and leaves the building, full stop. Without a simple and easy to monitor financial system, you're flying blind. And I'm the kind of guy who likes to have all my tools in one place. I'm talking checking accounts, bill pay, credit cards, and everything else I need to run a business. I'm pumped that Mercury is both a sponsor of this podcast and a safe place to keep my cash. It sure beats keeping my cash under my mattress again. Plus, it looks slick. I always get angry when back office tools are ugly. Newsflash. Finance people may wear both a belt and suspenders to work, but we like stuff that looks good too. Sorry, I just had to get that off my chest. Mercury simplifies your financial operations with powerful banking, giving you greater control, precision, and speed so you can operate at your best. Make the switch today, like I did. Tell them your boy CJ from Run the Numbers sent you. Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided by Choice Financial Group and Evolve Banking Trust. Members FDIC. What does the future hold for business? Ask 9 experts and you'll get 10 answers. Bull market, bear market. Rates will rise, rates will fall. Can someone please just invent a crystal ball already? Until then, over 40,000 businesses have future-proofed their companies with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make quick decisions. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. Whether you're closing the books in days, not weeks, you're spending less time looking backwards and more time on what's next. If you listen to this podcast, you'll know I ask CFOs all the time to rep their tech stacks, and I would say almost every one of them use NetSuite. And that's what I would use too. Whether you're a company earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/metrics. The guide is free to you. That is netsuite.com/metrics. Ooh, yeah, it's netsuite.com/metrics. Please, guys, I really need this. Navaid, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, CJ. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you've had an exciting journey to CFO, and along that path to a company now that's in the healthcare space, you were actually negotiating broadcast rights at one point. And so we're gonna get into what you're up to now and what you've been building at Dialogue. But as somebody who considers himself, a mini media mogul myself, do you mind if I pepper you with a couple of questions out of curiosity?
No, I'd love to talk about that. It's been quite a long time since I've been on that journey, but happy to talk about it.
So I believe you're at a company called Rogers. What types of deals were you working on?
So I initially started at Rogers in a finance role on their sports television business. They had two different television businesses. One was sports and one was non-sports. And it gradually, a few months after I started, my role was expanded to include the Sportsnet business, but also in a finance capacity. After a couple of years, there was a restructuring, and my role expanded again. On top of the finance portfolio, I also inherited the sports programming responsibilities, which involved not only scheduling all the Sportsnet channels, but also negotiating broadcast rights. And our mission at that time was to surpass TSN and become the number one sports media brand in Canada. At the time, Sportsnet was a very distant number two behind TSN. So in order to achieve our mission, we needed to get more programming, and this required aggressively going after broadcast rights that were held by TSN or CBC in some cases. So over the course of the next few years, as rights came up for renewal, I began building relationships with many teams and leagues, such as the NFL, Major League Baseball, National Hockey League, obviously, as well as European soccer leagues like UEFA, like Premier League Soccer, just to name a few. And over time, gradually, because of those relationships and obviously being aggressive when it came to bidding, we started winning more and more of those deals and started to close the gap with TSN. And then the biggest prize, obviously, was a 12-year landmark deal with the National Hockey League, which basically brought all national hockey rights away from CBC and TSN, and they brought them all to Sportsnet and made Sportsnet the undisputed leader. As you know, hockey's a religion in Canada, and that was a big win for Rogers and Sportsnet, and a big loss to both CBC and TSN. So that was sort of the culmination of the many deals that I negotiated, but it was a phenomenal journey, and I'm glad to have played a small role in making Sportsnet what it is today.
That's so exciting. I mean, you hear about all these NFL deals, at least in the US, that are being negotiated. Like Amazon Prime pays billions and billions of dollars for the rights to this. I can only imagine how exciting it would be to, like you said, I mean, hockey's religion in Canada. You were basically taking the Prime TV asset and negotiating for it at the time.
And that's why we were able to bid. I think it was $5.2 billion over 12 years for the NHL rights in Canada.
This is like the real inside baseball, but that has such a knock-on effect on just the sports landscape, because that's ultimately what the contracts are negotiated off of, right? The salary caps are dictated.
TV rights is big business, and one of the many reasons sports teams are able to pay athletes the way they do is largely in part due to the broadcast deals.
And you were there probably during the time when cord cutting started to become a thing, right?
Yeah, cord cutting had started, and both Rogers, who owns Sportsnet, and Bell, who owns TSN, obviously they have big television businesses, and they saw sports as a way to not necessarily eliminate cord cutting, but definitely either slow it down or even reduce cord cutting to what they call cord shaving, where people may downgrade some of their channels, but they would have to keep sports, because if you wanted to watch hockey, the only place to watch it was Sportsnet. So it made people think twice before cutting their cable subscription.
I mean, sports is the last bastion of like basically live entertainment that everyone's bidding for, and so it's such a fascinating time that you're able to be involved in some of those bigger deals. I bet it helped you hone your negotiation skills too.
It did quite a lot. A lot of it starts with information gathering, intelligence gathering through relationships with the leagues and the teams, as I mentioned. So it definitely helps to have a sense of what it's going to take to win the deal. But it often goes beyond the dollars, especially like I mentioned, a couple of the leagues. The NFL is one of them, but also Premier League, UEFA. In addition to the financial aspect, they want a partner who's going to help grow their sport, especially in Canada. I mean, soccer is popular, but it's not very popular. So, for example, Premier League and UEFA both wanted partners who would promote the sport, who would broadcast as many games as possible. So, aside from the financials, a lot of these leagues were looking for good partners, and we were able to demonstrate that we can be good partners.
That's such an astute point, because the best product in the world isn't really anything without distribution, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Maybe just one more question, if you'll humor me on the broadcasting front. So I'm a big fan of Vice Media, and I was digging into your background. It looked like you struck up a JV with them.
Yeah. So this was sort of in my last couple of years during my tenure at Rogers. We talked about cord cutting, and what we were seeing is that younger consumers were just becoming very skeptical of traditional media, and were even more likely to either never subscribe to cable or cut their cable subscription, and they favored online services. And at that time, Vice was emerging as a very popular online content company, especially with the younger demographics. So our leadership, we saw it as an opportunity to partner with Vice to launch a new TV channel on cable, catering to these younger audiences. So Rogers entered into a JV with Vice to launch that TV channel, but also to create a Canadian studio which would produce hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of new content in Canada for consumption, not only in Canada on that channel, but to distribute that content worldwide to the entire Vice Media Network globally. They were launching channels in many different countries. Vice was an edgy brand, and it was a very, very interesting project that I learned a lot from, and it was definitely one of the highlights of my professional journey.
I noticed that you mentioned that the content was produced in Canada. That's great for the economy too, right? Like you're making sure that the economy is being stimulated and people are coming there to actually work on stuff and create jobs.
Yeah, and Canada has a very deep content production industry, and the government and the regulations require all broadcasters and cable companies to invest heavily in content. But yeah, this was definitely something we took pride in, that we would be able to produce world-class content out of Canada to be exported to other countries.
I love it. I love it. What a cool chapter. I want to dig into Dialogue because you've been on quite the ride there. And if I have the timeline right, in terms of business transitions, did you go from private to public to back to private? Do I have that right?
Actually, before I start, let me tell you a little bit about what Dialogue is.
Yeah.
So it's a company that was founded in 2016. And we started off as a telemedicine service, giving access to people who were not able to see doctors in the public healthcare system. And very early on, we focused on, we never sold directly to the patient. So the way to get access to Dialogue is through your employer. So we sell to the employer, and the employer makes our service available to their employees. So going from 2016 as a startup, when I joined at the end of 2019, we were about $10 million in revenue. All the way now, within 5 years, we grew it from 10 million to now approaching $140 million in revenue. During that time, we went public, went back to being private and acquired by Sun Life. So all of that has happened in the span of less than 5 years. Actually, it's going to be 5 years for me next year when I join. But now we serve over 8 million Canadians, which is 19% of the Canadian population has access to our services through their workplace or through their family members. We serve over 50,000 employers across the country. We perform between 3,000 and 4,000 consultations on a daily basis, which is more than any emergency room in the country. And now we offer 3 services: primary care, mental health plus, as well as EAP, and a couple of SaaS-like services such as wellness and ICBT. 15 months after I joined, the company was trading on the TSX. In terms of the IPO, it's a great story. Our board decided during the Christmas break in 2020 that we should go public. The IPO windows in Canada open for a very limited time, and we wanted to take advantage of that open window and the favorable market conditions. And I remember we kicked off the IPO with our banking and legal advisors in early January of 21, and we were trading on the TSX on March 30th. It was one of the fastest IPOs in Canada. I think it was 77 days from start to finish, and we were able to raise money at peak market conditions. So that was a great transition, going from a private company to a public company CFO. And then a couple of years later, our board decided that the best way to maximize value for our shareholders was to look at a sale of a company, which was a natural next step for the future and growth of the company. And we can talk about the process if you like, but Sun Life emerged as a natural partner for Dialogue to enter into this next chapter. So as of October of last year, we are now a private company, 100% owned by Sun Life, and operating for the most part independently. with Sun Life governance at the board level. But yeah, it's been quite the full circle in such a short period of time. Going from doing an IPO and then going private and coming full circle is a CFO's dream and happens over many years, if not decades. And I've been fortunate that I got to experience both of them in less than 5 years.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Being an operator is not for the faint of heart. It often feels like you're jumping out of an airplane and building the parachute on your way down. CEOs, CFOs, COOs, and BizOps leaders feel my pain. That's why I joined Operators Guild. It's home to more than 1,000 of the most elite, high-growth operators in the world. Think the Special Forces for business scaling. Members have access to over 150 in-person events across all 25 global chapters. The modern startup founder, CFO, and COO are really just multidisciplinary problem solvers, which is why having the best problem solvers together has created the ultimate diversity intelligence of any operator group in the world. Operators Guild gave me the chance to meet my own personal board of directors, people I can bounce ideas off of, and their online forum allows you to get answers from your peers as questions pop up. Like, how do I run an employee secondary? Or what should I pay as a base commission rate on SaaS deals? I've made great friends through attending their highly acclaimed OG Summit and frequently attend their online masterclasses taught by the best tech operators in the business. Join Operators Guild and access the Navy SEALs of high-growth business scaling, a group built by operators for operators. Learn more and apply at operators-guild.com. That's operators-guild.com and tell them CJ sent you. They'll hook you up. Annual planning season is upon us. That's right, my favorite time of year. And it's not just about setting goals for the coming year. It's about ensuring you have the right tools in place to measure and achieve those goals. As a SaaS CFO, I know having access to reliable, real-time metrics is crucial for my annual planning process. That's why I'm so excited to partner with today's sponsor, Maxio. Maxio is a billing and financial operations platform that helps subscription businesses reconcile bookings, billings, GAAP revenue, and SaaS metrics automatically. By the way, guys, bookings, billings, GAAP revenue, not the same thing. Got to get them straight. Because these numbers are the foundation of your financial models, it's important to have quick access and trust that they are correct. Don't let the complexities of SaaS finance and accounting slow you down. If you want to start 2025 with the right tools, check out Maxio by visiting maxio.com/run the numbers. That's maxio.com/run the numbers. Request a demo through our link to support the podcast, ya boy, and receive a 10% discount on your first year with Maxio. That's maxio.com/run the numbers. maxio.com/run the numbers. Please, guys, I really need this. Okay, serious question for all my accounting pros here today. Are you doing what you were hired to do? What I mean is, do you have time to actually be a business partner, or are you buried in tedious manual tasks just to get your journal entries prepared every month? I know how that feels. Leapfin's here to help with that. Leapfin is accounting automation software that automatically prepares and posts reliable journal entries. And that's just the beginning. High-growth businesses like Reddit, Canva, and SeatGeek choose Leapfin to eliminate manual tasks, accelerate month-end close, and enable accounting leaders like you to provide faster insights that will help your company grow. If you're battling messy transaction data from Stripe, Adyen, Shopify, Apple Pay, and other PSPs, and then battling again to get it all into NetSuite, go to leapfin.com to watch their short product intro video. And if you like what you see, request a 15-minute conversation to learn how accounting automation can help you and your team. Check out leapfin.com today. That's leap like jump, fin like shark. I just made that up. I hope they're okay with it. Leapfin.com. Navaid, I want to dig into the actual business transformations and where the shares were held, whether it was public or private. But for a second, I do want to acknowledge that you were at the company at a very exciting time when telehealth was becoming like a real thing. Like a lot of CFOs go through their careers, and you're trying to also time, am I joining a company at an inflection point? And it feels like you joined at the right time for telemedicine.
Well, you're absolutely right. That in hindsight, that's exactly what it feels like. When I joined in November, obviously, COVID had not started at that time. The company was already growing 2x or 3x on top line. And I joined Dialogue, and I was fortunate enough that they selected me as a CFO because I wanted to experience that kind of growth. That's something that had eluded me all my career. I had worked for Bell, I had worked for Rogers, I had worked for Just for Laughs. And they were all fantastic companies, but they were never growing at the rate that Dialogue was growing, and I wanted to experience that growth. But I distinctly remember a conversation with Sharif, our CEO, during the interview process. And I asked him point blank if he had any plans to go public in the near future. And he said, not at least for the next 5 years. We want to continue growing and investing in the business, and we'll think about an IPO or some sort of exit, but it will be at least 5 years. Lo and behold, 3 months after I started, COVID happened. Sun Life became our biggest shareholder and our biggest customer in March of 2020. And the circumstances changed so fast that we had to adapt to it and take advantage of the market conditions and do an IPO. And I always remind myself that if Sharif and the board knew that they would do an IPO within a year or shortly after I started, they probably would have chosen another CFO who had done an IPO before.
But you made it through. And just for anyone who's in the US listening, are there any maybe like defining characteristics about going public in Canada, or anything that you would point out that's unique to the Canadian stock market?
I haven't done an IPO in the US. I mean, Dialogue has been my only IPO. There are a lot of similarities in the process to do an IPO. Regulations wise, I think it's very similar. I think what's different and nuanced about the Canadian market, as I mentioned earlier, US, the market relatively remains consistently open for good companies to do IPOs.
Yeah.
In Canada, the nuance is the market opens for a short period of time, once every couple of years. Like when we did an IPO, when we IPO'd in March of 2021, shortly after that, the market really shut down in terms of new IPOs. And I don't think it's really open now. We're approaching 4 years since that time. There's a handful of IPOs, big mining companies that are doing IPOs right now. But the market, when it closes in Canada, it doesn't reopen for a few years. And then when it opens, it's open for a short period of time. And that's exactly one of the reasons why we decided to do an IPO when we did, was to take advantage of that open market, because you never know when it's going to close and reopen again.
Thanks for pointing that out, because I feel like people in the US have felt like we've been in this IPO freeze for a number of years. Some would say about 3 years now.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's a longer winter in Canada in many respects.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And that's a key difference between Canada and the US. And that's why in Canada, if you have IPO aspirations, you have to be ready when the market opens and take advantage of it, because you never know how quickly it's going to close again.
How has your role as CFO shifted when you're small and privately held to public with more eyes on you, and then you get owned by a bigger company and now private again?
Definitely a big shift between both of those transitions. The shift from private company to a public company had a big, huge impact on my role. And it was new to all of us. The entire management team here did not have experience from a public company perspective. I had worked at Bell & Rogers, so I had been exposed to it, but never in a CFO capacity. So there were a lot of learnings for all of us. And I began spending a lot more time than I used to interacting with financial analysts and investors. A lot of our time was spent preparing for the quarterly reporting cycle and the analyst calls. So as a CFO, it's a lot more challenging and time. It demands a lot of time being a public company CFO, because you're constantly trying to balance long-term strategic decisions against short-term profitability targets. Analysts and investors place a lot of weight on management's credibility. And it takes a lot of effort to not only ensure that you earn their trust, and then even more challenging sometimes is to maintain that trust by consistently delivering on what you promised. And then going the other way, transitioning to a private company owned by another large company such as Sun Life was also an adjustment. I had prior experience from my days at Bell & Rogers, so I sort of had an idea what to expect. Which wasn't necessarily the case for the rest of the management team or employees here at Dialogue. And given that Sun Life is a public company, we still have quarterly targets that we need to hit. And the reporting process is still quite rigorous, but I'm not having to spend as much time preparing for the quarterly reporting calls with analysts and going on the road to speak with investors. So I'm spending my days a little bit differently. But yeah, tremendous change in a CFO's role, going from private to public back to being private.
It sounds like the balance of time shifted a bit for a period of time where a lot of it was focused externally.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm spending a lot more time on strategic things that I did not have time to do when I was a public company CFO. So it's really freed up my time to focus more on the strategy, and even my role has expanded recently to include the strategy portfolio. So yeah, I'm getting to some more fun stuff now that I have that time.
I always hear public company CFOs describe the emphasis on long-term planning for the public markets, but when you hear a CFO on an earnings call, I can't help but think like they must have a bit of an inkling that they're living quarter to quarter. I'm like, yeah, I feel like you have eyes on you short term too.
Absolutely. That was one of the biggest challenges of being part of a management team in a public company is you definitely want to do what's in the best interest of the company long term. But at the same time, you have to deliver on quarterly financial targets and the analyst expectations, because if you don't, your stock price is going to take a beating, and then you're going to have the board and your investors calling you 20 times a day. So it's a very, very tricky balance, and that's something that you have to live with, and it's the reality of being a public company. Which, as a private company, you have a little bit more flexibility to be able to make some decisions that may impact short-term profitability, but what you believe is the right long-term decision for the company.
Yeah, and it feels like take privates are having a bit of a takeoff right now in the US with a lot of larger private equity buyers circling up, especially as interest rates fall.
Yeah, as capital becomes cheaper, that's definitely the trend that we see.
Do you think that there's less pressure, at least externally facing? Like, did you feel like the temperature in the room went down a bit, or is it, hey, it's the same thing when I show up to work every day? Eyes are still on me as a CFO to lead the team here.
Sun Life is a long-term strategic investor. Yeah. They have a lot of trust in the management team. Obviously, we all as a management team feel the pressure to deliver on our results, but we're also dealing with a very patient and strategic investor. So if we do want to make some reasonable bets, Sun Life is definitely open to those. So it's a different kind of pressure, but there's pressure nonetheless in a CFO role.
Yeah,
but I would say it's a different kind of pressure, but it's a very supportive environment.
We've spoken to a couple different CFOs, including Amanda Whalen of Klaviyo and being taken public. Same thing with Sonali Parekh of Ring Central. We've never spoken to anybody about being taken private. So you can nerd out as much as you want on this because people love it. But mechanically, how does it work?
Great question. And again, it was quite the journey. So in the fall of 2022, the public markets were not performing as well. And companies that had gone public, like ourselves in 2021, our stock had depreciated quite a lot. Not because we were underperforming expectations. It's just the sentiment towards our industry had changed. And after a lot of careful consideration, our board concluded that it was in the best interest of our shareholders that we consider a sale. So the first thing we did was we established a separate committee of the board, a special committee made up solely of independent directors to look at all possible alternatives. We hired bankers and legal advisors similar to an IPO to help with the process of reaching out to potential buyers. And Sun Life was a natural part of that process, as they were already our biggest shareholder, and Dialogue was a very strategic asset for them. So from the fall of 22 to the early part of 2023, over the course of a few months, we prepared our presentations. We met with several potential acquirers. We presented our strategy and our business plan, all with the goal of soliciting offers that were evaluated by the special committee and then ultimately presented to the board when the special committee felt it was appropriate. And from start to finish, the entire process lasted about a year. So we went public in less than 3 months. The sale process took about a year from start to finish. And inevitably, there were many, many twists and turns. But ultimately, the special committee recommended and our board agreed that the offer from Sun Life was in the best interest of our shareholders, not only in terms of value, but also the best fit for Dialogue in terms of alignment of the two companies' missions, values, and culture, which would all allow for a smooth transition. So it was a very comprehensive process. And at the end of it, we felt confident, as did our board, that we achieved a great outcome for all of our stakeholders, whether it's our shareholders, our employees, and not the least of which are our customers and our members. But yeah, it was a very comprehensive and well-run process under the guidance of the special committee created by the board.
Thanks for explaining that, especially the special committee part. I didn't know that was set up in most of these transactions.
Yeah, typically in major transactions, the board will set up a special committee and try to keep as many independent directors on that committee as possible to avoid any real or perceived conflict of interest.
And it sounds like, first and foremost, you wanted to maximize shareholder value. And then there was also the understanding that, listen, you can control what you can control, but there will be aspects macro-wise that, just the playing field isn't right at the time, and the asset will function better in this system versus that one.
Exactly, yeah. And that's what happened in our situation.
What a ride.
Like we were well capitalized. We were on track for our profitability targets, but the market was in a different space.
Nonetheless, what a ride, and thanks for sharing that with us. I want to talk about how the P&L may change during these transitions. I would imagine you had to rethink the look and shape of it based on your stakeholders and their priorities. Did how you manage the P&L change throughout these 3 chapters?
For sure, I would say the objectives of our shareholders and our board are a little bit different depending on the stage. As an early stage company, around the time when I started, the thing that matters the most is revenue growth.
Yeah.
And obviously, very closely tied to that is the cash burn rate. How much cash are you burning through on a monthly basis? And when you compare that to how much cash you have on the balance sheet, it gives the investors an idea of the runway you have before you run out of cash. So as an early stage company, profitability does not matter. It's all about revenue growth. It's about growth at all costs. Do whatever it takes to win revenues. Don't worry about the P&L. Just make sure you don't run out of cash. As a public company, investors and analysts, they want to see that you're growing. Growing the top line is still very, very important. But you're also judged on how you're delivering against your profitability projections. That doesn't mean you have to be profitable out of the gate, but as long as you're making progress towards your profitability goals, that's what they look for. And when we IPO'd, we had provided guidance to our investors that we would be profitable by the end of 2023. So every quarter, we were asked the question, and we were heavily focused on attaining our goal to become profitable, which we actually did. We actually achieved profitability a quarter earlier than we had expected in Q3 of 23 instead of Q4 of 23. And now back to being a private company, which is owned by another public company. I mean, we still have to report on our quarterly performance, P&L, revenue growth, EBITDA, all of those matter. But Sun Life's objectives from Dialogue are slightly different than what public company investors were expecting. We did provide Sun Life projections during the sale process, and we're holding ourselves accountable to those projections, both in growth and on profitability. But Dialogue is relatively small in the grand scheme of things when you look at Sun Life. So a small deviation does not have a material impact on Sun Life. But regardless, we as a management team at Dialogue, we do hold ourselves accountable to deliver on those projections. So not a lot has changed on that aspect, but Sun Life's perspective is very different for Dialogue than what public company investors were looking at.
Navaid, I like how you pointed out accountability and credibility as defining characteristics in the journey to getting to profitability. It's not like you have to show up to the dance on day one and be like, look, we're profitable. It's, do I believe you're going to get there when you say they're going to get there? And you were actually able to do it earlier.
Absolutely. And both Sharif, myself, and the management team, I mean, for us, our credibility, I mean, and analysts and investors, they invest in companies, but they invest in companies based on management. And the only thing, if there's one thing that we have that we can lose easily is our credibility.
Yeah.
And that's something that both Sharif and I took very seriously when we were talking to investors and analysts. We were always transparent and open with them, and they respected us for that. And the only way to build credibility is to do what you say and say what you do. And we took it very seriously that we wanted to deliver on the commitments we made to public investors. And now the same thing with Sun Life. We gave them a set of projections when they decided to buy the company at the price that they paid, and we hold ourselves accountable to delivering on those projections.
Someone once said to me that a revenue multiple is a representation of your multiples of credibility. So it's what's the believability in your story. And I think what you said there really holds true. There are a lot of companies in the US in particular, tech companies, that have been perpetually 18 months away always from profitability. And it's always 18 months away.
Yeah, that wasn't the case for Dialogue. We said that we would be profitable by the end of 23, and we got there in Q3 of 23.
So take me through your priorities and thinking when you're going from growth at all costs to running a profitable shift. Did you feel like, as many of us may have felt at other tech companies, that the temperature shifted overnight, or was that kind of all in the plan from the beginning? How did you have to react to that?
It definitely did not happen overnight. And it's a very tricky and delicate balance, that shift from a growth at all cost mindset to a healthy, profitable growth, especially in the context of a healthcare business in Canada, where healthcare and profit are not synonymous in Canada, because there's very few companies or businesses that provide healthcare services, because we have universal healthcare provided by the government. So it was a delicate balance, and required us a shift in the culture across the entire company. And for Dialogue, it was about becoming a sustainable business to ensure that we continue to grow, but in a healthy way, because cash is not unlimited. So if we didn't become profitable, eventually we would run out of cash. Revenue was and still is the most important thing, growing the top line. But by focusing on margins, remaining focused on our core strengths, being disciplined, all that combined with strong leadership. I think strong leadership is key, allowed us to make that transition to a healthy growth mindset. But it did not happen overnight. It took easily 3 to 4 quarters for that culture, that mindset across the organization to shift. And obviously, it was a company-wide effort. Obviously, the finance team plays a key role in these transitions. And I've always believed that good finance teams are those that work with the business as true business partners and advisors to help the business achieve their goals. It's a lot easier to say no to things. And in finance, a lot of CFOs like to say no and play the goalie. But it takes a lot more effort and work to work with the business and find innovative ways to achieve business objectives. And going back to my sports state, I mean, I'll use the hockey analogy. And as a finance team, we sometimes play defense by protecting the P&L and improving the balance sheet. But sometimes we need to take risks and join the attacks and score a few goals ourselves. So it's always that balance that you have to strike.
Oh man, I love that analogy, because I often joke at my company, like, listen guys, I'm the only one who's playing defense here. I'm the only one who's playing goalie. But that resonates. There are times where I think finance has to push the pace, especially if they feel like we're leaving money on the table.
Yeah.
Can you say more about the nuances of being a healthcare company and profitability? We haven't spoken to anyone from the healthcare space, and you bring up a good point about you have this backdrop, especially in Canada, of government subsidized or government universal healthcare. We have some aspects, but it's way more privatized in the US. So how does that change how you look at the P&L or maybe your growth targets?
So first and foremost, I mean, we are a business. Yes, we operate in Canada, where the government provides universal health care for all of its citizens. We are a business, and we don't get any money from the government for the services that we provide. Our revenue comes from employers and insurance companies, and then we offer our service as a benefit to those employees. So in order for us to be sustainable in the long term, we have to be self-sufficient. So we have to be profitable, because if we run out of money, then we can't provide services to anybody.
Yeah.
So that's first and foremost. What does profitability look like for a healthcare company? No, not very different than any other company for that matter. Obviously, top line growth is a big priority for us, and we want to continue to grow our top line. We are very focused on our gross margins, and we want to maintain or even expand our margins where possible, because that helps us remain competitive when it comes to pricing. And we are a technology-enabled service. So healthcare traditionally, particularly in Canada, has not seen a lot of technology-based innovation. But we have tech as part of our DNA. So we want to use technology where possible to improve our margins, drive efficiencies, and become even more competitive. And lastly, it's about remaining disciplined on our costs, remaining focused on our core business, not chasing too many things. We're not a capital intensive business, and our financial structure is relatively simple and easy to understand. I would say the biggest nuance, not necessarily about healthcare, but more specifically about dialogue. And that's over my 30-year career, I haven't seen a collection of individuals in terms of people, the quality of the talent that Dialogue has, in the several hundred employees that we have, and the hundreds and hundreds of practitioners that we use on a daily basis, such as doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, who provide healthcare services to thousands of patients a day. We want to be able to continue to attract and retain these resources, and that's where we invest most of our expense dollars, because yes, we use technology, but at the end of the day, it's our people that are providing the much needed healthcare to our patients, and that's something we look at very, very closely.
I love how you said it was a tech-enabled business. That's such a good modifier to put on it, because, like you said, at the core of it there is this human element and this human relationship. Like tech makes it go faster, but that's not the only thing.
Yeah, I mean, we're a healthcare business. I mean, we're many years, if not decades, away from even thinking about using technology like AI or something like that to deliver healthcare. I think humans have to deliver healthcare, and that's what we do. Yes, technology allows us to do it more efficiently, more effectively, and in some cases faster. But we're dealing with people's lives, and we need very qualified professionals to deliver that service, and that's something we don't compromise on.
Got it. That's great. Before we move into some more quick hitters here, I do want to step back and reflect that you've been a CFO in times where you got to say yes more than you said no, and then the reverse, times where you had to say no. Do you think that there are differences in the characteristics of CFOs that are well suited for each role, or is it something that you just kind of have to learn on the fly?
I think you have to learn on the fly. I think the key thing is you have to be adaptable. There are times where you have no choice but to say no, and there are times where you have no choice but to say yes and then figure it out. Like if you have a do or die situation that you have to spend $2 million on something that you did not plan for, then the first reaction has to be, yes, this is something we have to do. And then as a CFO, you got to figure out a way to pay for it so that you can still meet your profitability target. So adaptability is absolutely key. Adapting to internal changes, external factors, macro conditions, micro conditions, things that are within your control, out of your control. So it's all about being adaptable and agile, where sometimes you don't have the luxury of time to make big decisions, and you have to make decisions on the fly. So it's about being adaptable and adjusting to circumstances around you as needed.
Agility and adaptability. I like that. Would you say those are two hallmark characteristics of what separates the good CFOs from the great CFOs?
In my humble opinion, yes, those are two key distinctions. Yeah.
Nice. All right, I'm going to take you into what we call our long ass lightning round. So you're a successful guy. You've been through some interesting chapters and you've had some amazing roles, but you got to give me one thing you've screwed up in your career, this job or another.
Just one. I mean, in the finance role, there's been many times where I've missed budgeting for a major expense. I remember there was this one time where it was a relatively significant investment that I just forgot to include in the budget, and it was absolutely something we had to do. So when it came time to make the expenditure, we had to scramble and cut other things to make it happen. But I mean, we all make mistakes. We're all human, and things don't always go as planned. And in a CFO role, when you're dealing with future information such as budgets and forecasts, you're likely to make mistakes or miss something. And it's happened many times in my career that I've missed something important and only realize the mistake when it's too late. But you have to take mistakes as learning opportunities and learn from them and put in processes in place to the extent possible to avoid repeating them. But yeah, I mean, I've made my share of mistakes in my 30-year career now.
Like clockwork, I forget every year to budget for laptop refreshes. I remember the new hires, but I never remember the refreshes. Next one I got for you. If you could tell your younger self something, knowing what you know today, what would you tell them?
A couple of things come to mind. One is don't take yourself too seriously. I remember in my younger days, I was so focused on work and always took myself very seriously, did not joke around. wasn't as funny as I am now. But I would say working and having fun are not mutually exclusive, and being able to enjoy what you do, and more importantly, who you work with, usually leads to a much more fulfilling professional life. And I would say for the 5 years that I've been at Dialogue, that's been the key difference. So we've been through a lot, but the good thing is we've been through it as a team, and we love coming to work every day. We poke fun at each other. We are running a serious business, but when you're having fun, it makes it a little bit easier. And then one other piece of advice I would give is don't underestimate the importance of networking. It's something that I did not prioritize earlier in my career, and I've been more focused on it in the past 10 to 15 years. I think as young people, we often underestimate the importance of building and maintaining relationships, but those relationships are extremely important and require some effort. And especially earlier in your career, it's an investment that if you make it and make it properly, will pay you dividends for the rest of your career.
I think a lot of young people hear importance of networking, but then they say, well, how do I start? Do you have any tactical ways that you've almost like gotten the cold start problem out of the way? Like, did you write down like a calendar on your fridge and like check off that you talk to one person a month, or how did you go about it once you knew it was a priority?
I did all of that. I made it a point to reach out to people I had worked with earlier on in my career, at least on a monthly basis, if not more frequently. Going out for a quick coffee, meeting for a drink after work. I mean, yes, there are many things going on in life, but you have to just make it a habit to be able to do that. Because if you don't stay in touch with somebody and then you call them out of the blue 6 years later, I mean, it's unlikely that they're going to take a call from you. But if you've stayed in touch and kept up with what's going on in their lives, what's going on professionally for them, it makes it a lot easier. So it's everything that you described, but it's not something that has to be something that takes up hours and hours of your time. It could be a 5-minute phone conversation. It could be a 2-minute email just to check up on somebody and say how you're doing. Or if you know somebody's wife is pregnant, just checking up on them, say how's the baby doing, and things like that. So it's little things that over time just accumulate, and it's very, very worthwhile.
That's gold. I love how you pointed out that it can be little things too, because people are saying, I'm so busy. Like, my hair's on fire. I don't have time to think about what color my socks are. Like, I don't have time to go out and get coffee with somebody twice a week or something, but like just shooting them an email.
Sometimes it's just sending a text message saying, thinking of you, hope everything's well. Let's get together soon.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. It's the smaller actions that accumulate over time, like you said. More of a technical one for you. Can you walk me through your finance software stack? What tools does your team use to get the job done?
We use a variety of tools. I mean, our ERP is NetSuite. We use UKG and AltiPro as our HRIS, and we have our internally built care platform that we use to deliver all of our technology services. I remember recently we had to change our expense management software because the one we used previously did not support both official languages here in Canada. Canada has both English and French. So we had to switch to another platform to be able to provide our employees with support in both languages. And that's something that's extremely important, especially for companies like ourselves operating and headquartered in Quebec, to be able to offer French language support to our employees and all the tools that we use. And that was just one example where we had to switch our expense management software just solely for the reason of providing language support in both official languages.
Yeah, I mean, the little things are the big things when it comes to that stuff. And it's such a good reminder just to any vendor that's listening that like language support, it's not something you can just gloss over if you want to expand your addressable market.
Yeah.
Last one I got for you. What's the craziest thing you've ever had someone try to expense?
I've seen many things in my career. I've seen flights costing over $20,000.
What?
I would say probably the most extravagant one was a business dinner which had several bottles of wine exceeding $1,000 a bottle. I think it was 800 euros a bottle, and there were several bottles consumed that night during a business dinner in France. On the other extreme, though, I've also seen cost-conscious employees expensing broccoli and other grocery items when they travel to save on their meal costs. I have this one colleague who she finds that buying groceries and cooking it herself in Airbnbs is cheaper than expensing a meal at a restaurant when she travels. So I've seen both extremes. where some employees go nuts and some remain very cost conscious.
I wasn't expecting the broccoli. Tell the truth. Were you at that dinner with the wine or no?
I was not at that dinner with $1,000 bottles of wine. No, I wish I was.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You've had an amazing career, and I appreciate all the insights into the journey that you've had at Dialogue.
Thanks for having me, Steve. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to staying connected.
Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, LOL. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.